What is going on, my lovely ladies and gentlemen of the world? Today I wanted to talk about what I would say would be the perfect fighting game. This actually, I shouldn't say the perfect fighting game, because that's a bit of a misnomer. This is the template that I think every single fighting game should follow when they're making it. Every single fighting game should have these elements involved in them if you want to show that you actually give a shit about your community, about people learning your game, and just having an overall comprehensive fun experience. Now, I should add a disclaimer in here. This is going to have nothing to do with gameplay, because gameplay is just so purely subjective. It's impossible to quantify what's fun and what isn't. Like, the only thing I could specifically say about gameplay is, like, have good, interesting characters that are fun to play, that contribute various play styles so that everybody has a role that they can play. You know, if you're a zoner, there should be zoning characters in the game. If you like rushdown, if you like grapplers, if you like, you know, mid-range neutral monsters, whatever, you should have representatives of those types of characters throughout your game. But then, like, even then, 2D versus 3D, within 2D, animate style versus Street Fighter style, you know, like, it's just so variable what people enjoy and what people don't, that there is no nailing down, like, these are the elements that need to be present gameplay-wise to make a good fighting game. That's impossible to do. And so I'm not going to have anything to do with that. What I do want to talk about are the modes that I feel are an absolute necessity that must be present in every single fighting game to, number one, show that you as a developer are actually putting your best foot forward and you care about your product and that you care about your community that you are trying to build around this game. Because I do think that fighting games are one of the biggest kind of, like, please stick with us and play forever types of games, right? Like, there are many games out there that are just play it once, you're done. You do one playthrough and you're done, and they're designed that way, and that's perfectly fine. There are many games that are designed to kind of, like, get you not committed, addicted to the gameplay formula. Like, MMOs are basically, because they're all subscription based, they are developed from a psychological standpoint to keep you hooked and wanting to do more and more things so that you continue paying and you keep playing. Fighting games, I think, are the one genre of games out there that are like, this is going to require a heavy time investment, but we're going to keep developing these games, we're going to keep updating them, we're going to keep you involved, engaged. We want you to still be engaged, and we want you to stick around, and if you do so, you'll get paid for it. You'll keep enjoying it more and more and more as time goes on. And so, as a developer, you should put your best foot forward in order to actually get that mentality flowing. Whereas many developers, they don't do that. And they have specifically said, like, no, we don't care, we're not going to do that. Fuck it, not enough people get involved in this kind of thing. You know, it's just such flippant excuses that fall so flat. And again, they are purely excuses that are meant to try to validate laziness in my eyes. So here, let's just jump into it. Here's exactly, like, it basically, if I was designing a fighting game, this is what I think would be a necessity for my fighting game. Feel free to add in your own ideas. If you think I left something egregious out, throw it out there. Maybe I did forget it. If you think something is unnecessary, feel free to try to throw me out the window. I don't fucking know. So first things first, obviously a tutorial mode. Like, come on. You should give people the basics of your game. Now, here's where it kind of gets a little sticky. How comprehensive do you want to get? In my opinion, you should get as comprehensive as possible. So something like Under Night and Birth EXE Latest. They have an incredibly comprehensive tutorial that taught me a lot of things. It teaches you about option selects that are intentionally put into the game. It teaches you about mechanics that a lot of people didn't even know were a thing. It went into heavy detail, and it also split it up in categories. So it's like, you know, the novice tutorial that teaches you the super basic elements of a game. Here's how you move. Here's how you jump. Okay, now that you know how to move and jump, here's dashing. Here's what assault does. Here's your buttons that you press, right? And then you move on past that. Like, now that you know what the buttons do, here's how you do special moves. You combine motions with a button and you get a special move. Stuff like that. You ramp it up. You give people the ability to learn and improve as time goes along, and as they get better at the, you know, quote-unquote novice stuff, they move up to the intermediate stuff, and from the intermediate stuff to the expert stuff. Beautiful setup. But Guilty Gear Xrd Revelator went one step further than they did, and they also introduced character-specific missions that you could partake in that would teach you about difficult elements of characters to deal with, and then you could basically try to deal with them. So like, Soul does a DP on you. Block it, punish it for X amount of damage, picking whatever character you desire. That step further is that kind of like, we really care. We want you to learn. We want to give you trials that are going to help you become a better fighting game player. Guilty Gear did that. I think every fighting game should do that. Now, taking it one final step further into, this is absolutely unnecessary, but I bitch about it every time I partake in a tutorial mode. Tailor it so you can pick any character to go through that tutorial mode in. Because in all the tutorials, you are basically stuck picking the main character. So if you do the incredibly stupidly basic, borderline pointless tutorial that Street Fighter V gave you, you had to play Ryu. If you do BlazBlue's tutorial, you have to play Ragnar. If you do Guilty Gears, you have to play Soul. If you do Unis, you have to play Hides. Allow people to pick the character that they were interested in, that they got the game for, and they're like, I really want to play this character. Tailor it for every single character in the game. Now, this is why it's a step beyond the necessity. That takes so much effort to tailor all the text around every single character in the game, to potentially tailor different special moves for what, you know, like what you need to teach, all that stuff. It takes a lot of extra effort, and whether or not that is worthwhile is most certainly debatable. And so that is something that I don't really think is cost efficient at all. But again, it's that extra step that really shows, like, we want everybody to be able to pick up this game and not have to pretend, because it's always felt weird for me, right? Like, you're kind of sort of teaching me this game through this character that I know I don't care about, I don't want to play, I don't want to spend any time with them. And so therein, it almost feels like a waste of time to go through this tutorial because I'm specifically learning this character rather than the character that I'm actually interested in. So that would be an absolute phenomenal step, but again, one that I think is absolutely unnecessary. And the final aspect of a tutorial that we're going back into things that I think are necessary, kind of moving out of what people perceive a tutorial to be and getting into the combo trials that the anime games are great at, that Street Fighter started in Street Fighter 4. And so it teaches you the basics of character combos. Now, very rarely are these combos optimal. Sometimes you get very close. But again, very rarely are they, you know, perfect. But what they do present to you is a very clear picture of what characters are capable of, what kind of combo chains you should be looking at. And so you can find things that kind of like, all right, I take this part of combo trial number 2 and add it to this part of combo trial number 6, and now you put these two together and suddenly they actually form like the perfect combo. You get a better feeling of the character, what they're capable of, and you also get a fundamental basis with which to base your future with this character. So you can start working on something rather than just starting with a blank template and just trying to go from there. So I do think combo trials are an absolute necessity. Now, one thing that I do kind of miss that BlazBlue used to do, but they took away in Central Fiction, they weren't just combo trials that specifically told you do this combo here that is printed on this screen. They actually gave you challenges. And so it was like, for instance, Tager's. Well, I think everybody had one that was combo into this character's astral. Some of them would not have had that, like Hakumen, for instance, can't combo into his astral. But there were trials like that, and then everybody had a trial on their very, very last one, which was tailored to that character. So like one of Tager's was do a combo that uses 3 spark bolts in a single combo. For Azrael, it was do a combo that uses every single one of his drive moves, both normal and special, in a single combo. And they made you think. Like, sure, you could just go onto the internet and look them up, but they made you think about what a character is capable of. Something outside the normal bounds of, like, you know, this isn't something you really come up with on your own, but it gets those wheels turning. It gets the ideas flowing for things that a character is possibly capable of. You know, like, if you didn't think this character was capable of that, what else can they possibly do that you haven't thought of yet? You know, like, it starts to provoke creativity, which is a wonderful thing. So I do miss those. Now, one thing that Skullgirls kind of, you know, as many things as Skullgirls does right, it really irked me that in their trial mode, number 1, they never showed you the motions for special moves. They only showed you the name of that special move. So, like, unless you were well acquainted with the character and knew all of their special move names, you would have to look that shit up. It feels bad to have to do that. So print out like the move name and the motion at the same time so you can learn those hand in hand, which is a wonderful thing. And another thing Skullgirls left out for some reason, excuse me, another thing Skullgirls left out for some weird reason was the ability to see an example. I mean, almost every fighting game I've played has this, and I don't know why Skullgirls left it out, but still, it's a good thing to have an example so you can go in and you can see how the combo is supposed to work. So if there's, like, maybe you need to delay a move, and it's not incredibly obvious that you need to do that. Maybe a move has 5 hits in it, but the combo only wants 3 of them. You can see that. You can have a reference if you're screwing up a combo and can't really figure it out. You have that little aid there to help you. So there's basically my template for the perfect introduction to a fighting game. So you have the tutorials, the trials, and then like what Guilty Gear calls their mission mode is going above and beyond. Oh, I actually forgot to mention, shit, oh well. How Guilty Gear Xrd Revelators, one more thing that they did a lot better than Under Night and Birth was that they had a really interactive tutorial. Like, they had obstacle courses that you kind of had to move around in order to finish out the tutorial. You had to hit, like, floating Jacko minions with specific normals that would show up as they came out of their little fortresses. And so it made you, again, it kind of makes you think about which buttons to press, about what to do. It teaches you the variation of moves. And I really like that interactivity versus a game basically saying, all right, hit A, B, C right now. All right, cool. Good job, dude. Dash forward. Cool. Jump forward once. Cool. You know, like, that extra level of, again, like, it gets you thinking about scenarios that may pop up and how to potentially avoid them versus show and tell. Just, here's exactly what I want you to do. Do that. No context whatsoever. So, a big ups to Guilty Gear. I do think Guilty Gear probably has the best, when you combine the tutorial mode and the mission mode, probably the most comprehensive one, and one that I think I can more or less point to and say, like, yeah, they pretty much did it right. So next, after that, where do a lot of players go? Straight to arcade mode. Games should have an arcade mode, and they should represent a character in their very basic form. Now, some games do it, you know, as you would normally expect. Most fighting games do it right. Some of them don't do it too terribly well. Dragon Ball FighterZ, for instance, they fucked it up hardcore. Like, for some reason, they just make it so, like, you have X amount of quote-unquote regular fights, and then you get to the final one, and all of a sudden, the characters that the team that you're fighting against does, like, 100% extra damage, where a basic auto combo takes off, like, 80% of your health. And then, your hits do like 50% less damage. It's just so fucking strange. Like, why do you do that? And Guilty Gear did it as well. They made it not anywhere near as bad. But you get to the final fight, and the characters' supers that they throw out at you, I think they're called overdrives in Guilty Gear, do like 50% of your health. Just by themselves. Like, what the hell? Where did that come from? This isn't fun. This thing's, like, your AI, number one, from the start is button reading me. They're using invulnerable supers that do anywhere between like 50 to 70% of my life. Are you kidding me? This is absolute nonsense. This can't go on. Oh, pardon me for a second. But now I will say, after trash talking Revelator for that little bit, aside from that one misstep, I really think they nailed it, because they have some, like, you know, cinematic portions. They have actual character storylines involved in them. And so it isn't just a gauntlet of fights, it also includes some story elements and introduction to the character, and kind of gives you an idea of who the character is, what they're about, what their personality is, and you know, it's a good introduction to the character for people. So I do think that they more or less nailed it, and that is a template that you should try to utilize in order to move on, in order to have an effective arcade mode. It shouldn't be a story mode in and of itself, because you should, I feel, have a separate story mode. But it can be a good way to give aspects, like overall, kind of a broad idea of what characters are doing within the story in a very focused environment. So there's not much to say about arcade mode. It's been going on since the beginning of fighting games. Most of them have implemented it intelligently. I don't really need to go into detail about it. Now, I do think as well, on top of that, having other additional single-player modes Not necessarily a must, because again, it is fighting games, but I do think as time goes along, as we gain the ability to create better and better AI, the higher quality these potential modes can be. But I do think that, you know, I mean, because there's traditional stuff like time attack, survival mode. People don't really complain about those being implemented, nor do I think there's a lot of focus, like, you know, they're not exactly desired, but nobody's going to complain about their implementation. But I do think that there's a lot of enjoyment that goes into modes like Abyss mode or, what am I thinking? Unlimited Mars, for both of those for BlazBlue, are like the golden modes for Guilty Gear prior to Revelator. It just promotes this, like, absurd direction for the game itself that it's really fun to see, and it can be really interactive. Now, take that a bit further, like, BlazBlue actually allowed you to play unlimited characters in versus mode, and, like, sometimes it's just fun to be able to do that. My best example for that is actually Heroes versus Heralds in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Now, unfortunately, as much potential as that mode had for absolutely batshit insane gameplay mechanics, pretty much everybody relied upon, like, one super broken build, which basically made it so you had, like, 10 times the health recovery, you were practically impossible to kill, and it was just obscenely boring to fight against. But then, like, aside from that very small amount of cards that just kind of ruined the experience, you had additional stuff like giving you extra air dashes, giving characters flight mode that don't normally have flight mode, allowing people to cancel special moves into other special moves. A lot of just so much potential to create a wild, creative, fun environment. And I do think modes like that add a lot to a fighting game and add a lot to just, you know, like, it basically creates a party game out of something that's usually taken a lot more seriously. And that can be a lot of fun to engage in. So I do think modes like that have a lot of potential, especially if you can bring it into a versus mode. Because a lot of those modes are relegated to just being you versus the computer. But what if you make it so, you know, like, you can take Abyss mode power-up stuff and then fight somebody else using those same Abyss mode power-ups? Could be a lot of fun, you know, like, so it's just something that I think developers should think about. Again, not something that I would consider a necessity, but definitely something that can add to the overall quality and enjoyment of a fighting game, and that's obviously something you should always think about, is how can my game be improved? So that's pretty much it in terms of that stuff. So let's move on to the story, the big, the white whale that many developers are chasing, and none of them are really managing very well for a variety of reasons. Like, Capcom is basically incapable of, like, treating them, even their own story, seriously. For instance, like, they know that they don't have a good story, they know they don't have a good storyline, and so they essentially try to make it corny and cliche and a joke, and then it's treated like a joke, and people don't like it because even Capcom isn't taking it seriously, right? Then you have other story modes which are just absurd and ridiculous, and it's just like, how high did you have to be to come up with this? You know, like, there's a variety of quality, and I don't think any fighting game has really nailed it down. Now, weirdly enough, as much as I dislike Mortal Kombat from a gameplay perspective, Mortal Kombat 10 probably had the closest thing to a good story mode that I have experienced myself. It had aspects of cinematics involved. You got to play various characters in actual story-related fights. It was all kind of like a linear experience. It's not linear in the sense that, like, you start at point one with one character and you move down the line, but you are set in a timeline, and all of the stories that you are involved in, all the characters revolve around that timeline. So you're not dealing with any kind of weird, like, this is what would happen if this character is the main character in the story versus, you know, like, so basically you just have a lot of non-canon stories that all ultimately mean nothing because none of them are actually really what's happening. It's just kind of like a what-if scenario. I do think if you're going to make a proper story, then it should be like that. It should all revolve around a linear timeline where the story starts at point A, finishes at point B, and then you just learn how the characters that are involved in the story interact with each other and the world while the timeline goes from point A to point B. Unist also did a really good job of handling their own story mode. The one thing that I kind of take away from it is that, number one, again, there were no battles. involved. Guilty Gear as well. Guilty Gear, very, very cinematic, but there's no interaction whatsoever. You're literally watching a movie. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but I do think that, you know, a lot of people want there to be at least some degree of interactivity. I mean, you're playing a fighting game. You want to be involved in fights. So, like I said, I do think actually Mortal Kombat 10 has the closest thing to a good story mode that I have personally experienced in a fighting game. And if I were to build at least a template around it, that would be the one that I would go for. An equal mixture of cinematic moments, character-driven storyline, linear timeline. There you go. And it really is just... Oh, I didn't even mention Unist. Because, Unist, again, had no battles, but also it was so goddamn wordy. And this is just kind of a problem with Japanese development in general. Like, anybody that's experienced JRPGs has experienced multiple scenes where you're just sitting there like, holy shit, can we get on with it, please? And, like, it would just take, you know, like, 15 minutes of time. And I'm a very fast reader, so people that don't read as fast as me are taking even longer to get through these storylines. It just felt like it was taking 15 minutes to do something that should have taken 2 minutes instead. They were just so unnecessarily verbose. Whereas now, if you actually like experience the storyline, it starts out with Batista, and it's kind of like a lore. Like, this is the far past. This is where all of this started. This is the ancient history that led us to where we are now. Those particular slices of story were perfect. They were succinct. There was no wasted, you know, like, effort involved in too many unnecessary scenarios or just being unnecessarily bigger than it needed to be. It was just exactly what it needed to be. You couldn't take anything out without removing the quality of the story. There was no necessity to add anything more in. It was perfect. And so then you have like 4 storylines like that, and then you have like 15 other scenarios all tailored around a character that's involved in the game, and every single one of them again has like 3 or 4 episodes that all take 15 to 20 minutes that could have been cut down to 3, and you lose nothing in the process. Nothing of substance, at least. That's problematic. So, you know, a mixture, like, it really is so strange to me how every fighting game has, like, really interesting lore around it, but nobody can actually tie it up properly to evolve that into a good story. It's very strange. There's just so much potential there, but nobody's found a proper way to tap into it. So, you know, again, that's just what I would do. Try to, you know, look at Mortal Kombat 10, weirdly enough. So, moving on from there, that's kind of all the interactive stuff. So now, obviously, moving on from there, you need a training mode. Of course, you need a training mode. Now, I'm not going to get into every single little option. Pretty much every single fighting game has the small stuff handled. They know what needs to be there. But the things that I think not every fighting game have done and are also an absolute necessity in terms of allowing somebody, you know, the best potential to get competitive with the game, these things. An on-recovery option, which more and more fighting games have been doing recently, but a lot of them still leave it out. So on-recovery is something that triggers whenever a character leaves any sort of non-standard state. So if they're coming out of block stun, this thing would trigger. If they are teching, this thing would trigger. They're just coming out of hit stun, this thing would trigger, whatever. And so it gives you various options to do based off of that. Anything, really. Like, you should be able to record a motion, for instance. Because, like, almost every single fighting game has, like, a record and playback feature. But I actually can't think of any off the top of my head that have the ability to record something and then not have to play it back manually, just have something that can trigger that recording to act based on your own actions. Because it can be super difficult to try to record something and then time the playback to test something perfectly, right? Whereas if you could use like that kind of on recovery, then you would be able to test things like frame traps or punishments based off of block strings, whatever. You could do that a lot easier. So that is the first thing. So one of the things this also kind of allows you to do, which actually would be irrelevant, but something that it's very useful for, is using that on recovery feature to make somebody jump. And so then you put somebody in block stun with a normal, and then you hold up, and then you can tell by when the characters actually leave the ground how advantageous or disadvantageous that move is on block. But again, something that would be rendered completely obsolete and unnecessary if every single training mode had the option to display frame data. I don't know why they don't do this. Mortal Kombat 10 kinda sorta tried, in the sense that they gave you, along with everybody's move list, frame data in that move list, but it wasn't live. It wasn't something you could actually see happen. Skullgirls does do this, and it's perfect, and it's amazing, and every single fighting game should do that. Tekken 7, there's a mod on PC that allows you to see that. Somebody, like, that wasn't even involved with the entire project was able to create a mod for PC that shows all of the frame data. And you're telling me a person that actually worked on the game can't even get off their lazy ass and do that themselves? For every fighting game, Skullgirls is the only fighting game I have ever seen that has a live frame data viewer like that. Why? It's so imperative for anybody that wants to, like, really truly delve into the game mechanics and learn so much further. It's not a necessity by any means to know frame data perfectly, but just having the ability to be like, all right, you know what, I'm having a lot of trouble with this move. What's it look like on block? You know, like, what is it punishable? Is it not? For instance, a very recent discovery of mine was that I always thought Hazuma's airborne kind of, it's not really a dive kick, but it's more, I can't remember what the move name is itself, but it's J214B. I always thought that was safe on block because I had somebody abuse that against me and I could never punish it no matter what I did. And so I mentioned in a replay theater recently, like, it just blows my mind that that move is safe on block. And somebody said, that's not safe on block, dude. You're wrong. And so after that, I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm right, given how many times I had to block that shit and I couldn't do anything afterwards. But let me go test it. And as it turns out, it is not punishable under normal circumstances, but if you instant block it, you can punish it with a 6-frame move or faster. I was not aware of this. If there was any kind of frame data viewer, I could have seen that perfectly and realized, like, oh, it's because I'm normal blocking it, but if I instant block it, now it becomes punishable. Holy shit, my world is opened up. I wouldn't have to deal with this anymore. I get a free punish every single damn time, but I had no idea because I haven't been instant blocking it. But a frame data viewer would solve that perfectly. That needs to be a part of fighting games. It needs to be. And it blows my mind that almost nobody's doing it. Just kills me. So in addition to that, a hit and hurtbox viewer as well. Another thing that Skullgirls does. Shockingly, somebody that's actually been involved in a competitive community knows what is necessary for the competitive community in order to give people the tools necessary to really excel at their game. Now, the weird fucking thing to me is, for instance, like Capcom. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 on the Vita, just the Vita version, had a hitbox and hurtbox viewer. No other version has had it. The PS3 and Xbox 360 version didn't have it when they did the re-release. On PS4 and Xbox One, it didn't have it. When they did the PC release, it didn't have it. But the fucking Vita version has it? What? Kills me. Absolutely kills me. So yeah, that's a necessity as well. One additional thing that's actually very strange, I think is really cool, but apparently only like 4% of the people that have played BlazBlue Central Fiction have ever used this, if I saw the trophy data correctly. There is a mechanic in BlazBlue Central Fiction where you can download somebody's pre-recorded data, and you can actually go into training mode and use that recording in training mode. It's a really cool idea, but it's so, like, it's impossible to fucking find that data. They have some, like, weird-ass online forum that you can only access through the game itself that's just so dumb. It's laid out terribly. It's impossible to actually find that recorded data, but the idea itself is actually really interesting. So you can have people passing back and forth different things that they found with characters and say, like, this is a really cool setup I found. Try and beat it. This is a really interesting thing. So that is another thing that I don't think is an absolute necessity, but it's a really cool addition that I think has been underutilized in Central Fiction and has a lot of potential. So that would be something that I would personally add to my own training mode. So those are the necessities outside of, the obvious things that already exist and are very prevalent already. Like, there's not much that's left out of training mode these days. Most developers have that shit down. And now we get to the nitty gritty, something that is close to my heart. As we all know, I love doing me some replay theater. It allows you to watch people that are potentially playing at a higher level than you. It allows you to see matchups that maybe you're having trouble with people that are better at them. It's a very, very resourceful learning tool that I think is kind of underutilized in general. Not enough people really recognize the value that it can have in terms of learning the game and kind of showing you where you may be lacking in your own gameplay or paths to improving your own whatever. You know, like there's a lot of potential to it. But again, this is one of those things where like everybody does it slightly differently, and it's very strange because it feels like everybody has like one or two things that they do that nobody else does that are godlike, but then they also leave out one or two things that everybody else does do. It's just very strange to me. Now, I do think a mixture of Unist and Dragon Ball FighterZ would be the best. So like Dragon Ball FighterZ, for instance, doesn't actually have a page that is solely dedicated to like, these are the most recent uploads that have become available that you can just peruse at your leisure. Whereas BlazBlue does this and Unist does this. For some reason, Guilty Gear doesn't. That's one of those things that like, why does BlazBlue do this but Guilty Gear doesn't? It's very strange. But then you can also look stuff up by character. You can look stuff up by player. In Dragon Ball FighterZ, something that I don't think anybody else has done yet is the ability to follow specific players. So if you see somebody that's like, this person plays a character that I really enjoy, I think I can learn a lot from looking at this person's matches. So let me have a page solely dedicated to this person's matches that I can follow. That kind of thing. Really good idea. And then another page that factors out the like anybody that's high level, whatever it is. So maybe you want to search by rank. The colored square system has been very prevalent in anime games. Maybe you want to sort by that. Whatever. Just, you know, something that can allow you to see the higher, kind of at least hopefully lean you toward higher level gameplay that's going to do the most to help you learn the game. But of course, I would be remiss to talk about a replay theater option and not mention the one thing that nobody has done yet. Give me a goddamn rewind button. Holy shit. It blows my mind how many times I've seen something and been like, wait, and then I can't go back and look at it. I would have to get all the way through the replay, go back to the menu, start the replay up, and then most of them don't even have a fast forward feature either. So then I would have to sit there and watch and pray to God I don't miss the like 2-frame window to view whatever the fuck happened. And just do that over and over until I finally catch it. Give me a rewind button, for the love of God. Okay. And then finally, one last thing, because two of the bigger fighting games that have come out recently, Guilty Gear and Dragon Ball FighterZ, both did the same thing, which makes sense because they were both developed by the same person. They allow you to see a person's inputs live on screen. But for some reason, Dragon Ball FighterZ and Guilty Gear threw in an actual physical representation of each player's like joystick right directly in the middle of the screen, which basically like it blocks so much of the on-screen action. And you can either, it's all or nothing. You can't just say, I only want to see the button inputs that are put at the very edges of the side, which don't really distract that much. They're not really in the way. And I don't want these sticks here. Or alternatively, maybe you just want to get rid of like the input display on the sides and you only want to see the controller representation in the middle. You can't do either one of those. It's all or nothing. If you want to implement that, give the ability to mix and match. It blows my mind that they didn't do that. So that's not a whole lot necessary in replay theater. Online. Actually, I didn't even mention, I just realized scrolling through this, I don't have a versus mode anywhere. I guess fighting games don't need versus mode. Very easy to just mention that off the cuff. Obviously, you should have a 1v1 versus mode. That versus mode should have a replay option. You should be able to just, you know, like, because for something like, what was it, Street Fighter V, they didn't have that initially. You had to go back to character select beforehand. Like, it was just, or no, only the first player, or maybe that's how it was initially, and then afterwards they patched it in so that the person on the first player side controlled it. It was very strange. So, you know, you have a menu where you have a bunch of options. So you have, like, replay, which is just you go back in, you have the same stage, you have the same characters, go back to character select, go back to the main menu. That's it. Maybe you have an option too for stage select. Certain games would benefit from that. So that could be a good thing to have as well. Not really a necessity, but, you know, have that and have both players that can get involved in that, so they have to be in agreement for it, right? So, like, if somebody wants to go back to the character select screen, then one person hitting replay doesn't override that. The person with character select has priority. The person who wants to go back to main menu has priority over everything. That kind of thing. That's really it for versus. Not a whole lot of complexity there. So online, obviously you want an online versus mode. Important things, obviously ranked and player match and online training mode are very important. I don't think a lot of people know how beneficial an online training mode is. Basically, if you haven't experienced that yourself, it's really very simple. You connect with somebody else in the training mode environment where you can set certain variables, and basically it allows you to just kind of play against somebody infinitely. Maybe you have infinite spawning meter, but your health keeps coming back, so you can just play somebody non-stop without really dealing with the normal confines of a match. And that can be beneficial in certain ways. Obviously it can harm other things. You know, if you have infinite meter, that's not something that you're going to normally experience. Obviously, if you have infinite health, you don't really have to worry about getting hit, which can be a motivational tool to not get hit, and that's absent. But still, something that can be very beneficial. And it's definitely something that, you know, like being able to connect into an online training mode with somebody and just kind of mess around and try to teach somebody and be like, all right, hang on, stop playing right here. This thing just happened. Let me tell you about it. Let me tell you the answers for it. Learning possibility. Very good thing. Ranked and player match, obviously, are not exactly a whole lot necessary to talk about there. Now, I do think this is also something that more fighting games have been doing as time goes on. But making ranked a best 2 out of 3 format instead of just you play once and you're done, I think that's a very good thing, especially for a ranked format. So that should be nice. Now, obviously, the one kind of caveat, lobbies. They have been a mainstay since, I think the first time they popped up was in BlazBlue Jesus Christ. Chrono Phantasma. God damn. Guilty Gear expanded on it. They've stayed in BlazBlue. Persona 4 Arena had Ultimax had them. I don't think the original one did. And then now Dragon Ball FighterZ kind of has a souped up version. Actually, no, they don't really even count as lobbies. Really. Fuck Dragon Ball FighterZ version of it. That was a terrible idea. Don't do that kind of thing. But I've never been that big of a fan of it, but I think one aspect to it that's kind of tweaked my opinion is that as those came in, people in America basically stopped playing ranked. And I don't know if there's actually a correlation there, if that is the effect of it, but I would very much prefer if more people would play ranked for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to get into here, but that might kind of spoil my own opinion of the mode, because it does feel like people abandon ranked mode just to sit in those lobbies instead, which feels bad. Now, that being said, if the lobbies will return, there's something really strange. BlazBlue does not allow you to queue up to the actual stations. So basically, you just have to have people stand in line and rely upon the honor system, which never works. Relying on the honor system works for like 70% of people, and the 30% of people just don't give a shit. So have a system where you actually have to queue up for the matches, so you can actually enforce an order to them. It just makes no sense to do anything other than that. One thing that is necessary for all fighting game modes: start actually displaying connections by ping. I don't get why 90% of fighting games show you this arbitrary as hell bar system, which, like, you're not even given the criteria for what each of the bars are. You know, like, okay, so a 4-bar connection means you have somewhere between 5 to 20 ping, which is about as good as a connection can get. 3 bars is 20 to 40. 2 bars is 40 to 80. 1 bar is 80 to 150, and 0 bars is 150 onwards, which is unplayable as hell, right? You're not even given that. Nobody knows what the hell it means. You just kind of have to rely on, like, alright, 0 bars is shit, 1 bar is usually shit, but sometimes playable, 2 bars is a coin toss, 3 bars is usually good, but for some reason sometimes it sucks, 4 bars is the white whale of connections, and, unless you live in Japan, And if you find one, hold on to it for dear life and never let go. It kills me that they don't show you the ping, because that's the universal way to tell how good a connection is. It's just very strange to me that they don't display that. So if I was gonna make a fight, and Skullgirls does this as well. Like I said, Skullgirls does a whole hell of a lot of things right. Most things they do right. And that's definitely one of them. I think Third Strike Online, the remade version of it, and Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I think both of those HD remakes, quote unquote HD remakes, displayed by ping. I just don't understand why more fighting games don't do that. That feels like an absolute necessity. You also should be able to see the delay in match, just like Guilty Gear and Unist show you. So you can actually see, like, you can see it live. Like, something fucks up, right? An input gets dropped. Was it you? Was it the game? You don't really know. If you suddenly see the connection spike from a 3-frame delay to a 12-frame delay, you know, like, okay, something just fucked up here. Sucks. Connection went bad. That's too bad, right? Also, I would hope you should be able to see, I think Tekken 7 did this, if I remember correctly, being able to see whether or not somebody is using a wired versus wireless connection. Because wireless, it will fuck up. That is the nature of wireless. There is too much competing space for signals, and just that's how waves work. Shit gets lost in translation. This is what is called packet loss. That will inevitably happen no matter how good your wireless is. Doesn't matter if your router is literally directly next to your console. There is the potential for packet loss, and it will fuck up your match. So you should be able to see whether or not if they're using a wired or wireless connection, and you should be able to determine, do I actually want to play this person if they're using a wireless connection? Because it will have, you know what that potentially entails and whether or not you want to deal with it. Let's see. Oh, player matches. So one thing that would be really nice that I haven't really seen would be the ability to queue up for a match but not have to spectate. Maybe you can sit in training mode or whatever. Maybe you can play just arcade. Arcade mode's actually not really a good idea because you'll probably inevitably get stuck in a loading screen, and that's not really good to force people to wait potentially for that kind of thing. But just being able to sit in training mode instead of spectate would be like a really nice thing. So you just queue up, and then once it's your turn, a prompt shows up that's like, hey, get queued up for the match, send you straight to character select. You don't have to do the interim coming back to the lobby kind of a thing that a lot of games kind of force you to do. Just be able to skip straight from one to the other. Give that option. Sometimes you just want to kind of work on your own setups, work on your own combos instead of having to watch other people play. It can be beneficial. Give people the option. Also, one thing that I really like that BlazBlue does that not a lot of other ones do is the free-for-all option. Now, that being said, there is one really fucked up kind of organizational mess to it all, which is that once a match ends, like, not all, if you have 8 people in a room, there are 4 matches being played. Those matches are not all going to end at the same time. So chances are you kind of just wind up playing the same person over and over and over and over again because you queue out, you hit ready up, the other person hits ready up, and you go straight into the next match. So it can be very difficult to try to play different people inside of that mode if the room is already full. Give people the option to select, like, these 2 people are playing. Let me play the winner of this match. Let me play the loser of this match. That kind of thing. So again, it allows you to kind of queue up to play against a certain person. And just kind of, it will hopefully remove the possibility of you just playing one person over, of like 4 matches going on and those 8 people all playing the same person over and over and over again. That would be a really cool thing. Let's see. Any kind of tournament mode, I think, is a really cool idea because it allows you to just, it allows you to organize your own tournaments, which is a lot of fun to kind of have that format. Why not? It's not like it takes a whole lot of effort to set that kind of thing up. That's not something that I think is necessary in any way, shape, or form. But still, just a really nice addition, something that could create a lot of fun for a variety of people. So that is it. That is my entire list. I'm trying to think if there's any, like, absolutely, you know, like, scrolling through in the revelation that I just completely left out versus mode. Is there anything that's so obviously apparent? Like, why would you not have this? I don't think so. Because you have additional stuff, like, you know, a gallery mode, for instance. You want to have that because you have artwork that you can show off. You have concept art. A lot of people enjoy that kind of thing. You have, you know, like, for instance, a music player like Guilty Gears. A lot of people are going to enjoy that. But that's kind of outside the confines of, like, gameplay stuff. That's additional things. But, you know, stuff like that would be obviously nice. I think that's kind of it. Yeah, mode-wise, that's it. If you have anything extra, let me know. That I leave out something blatantly obvious? Let me know. Slap me upside the head with it, because I will deserve it. And that's that. I've talked for long enough. Thank you for listening. Hope you all have a wonderful day. I'm out.